Everyone's against me. Rivals attack Mexico leftist in TV debate. The EU and Mexico agree a new free trade pact. What does a Trump-Macron bromance mean for the world? And Ivana Trump thinks Donald Trump should just go and play golf instead of running for re-election. Hello and welcome to today's edition of Mexico News Network's Breaking News Business. I'm Elliot Bullman. Let's go to the information. The trailing pack of candidates in Mexico's July 1st presidential election on Sunday launched repeated attacks on the leftist frontrunner in a first televised debate, putting him on the defensive without luring him out into an open verbal brawl. Ricardo Anaya constantly launched attacks against AMLO, saying that forgiving criminals and giving them amnesty is not the right plan. Showing pictures with graphics, López Obrador said that the possibility of making an amnesty doesn't mean impunity, and stressed that during his tenure as head of government in Mexico City actually decreased the incidence of crime, vehicle theft with violence and the crime of murder. Antonio Meade called López Obrador a puppet of criminals and described his political party as a family business. Meade proposed to achieve a single criminal code so that crimes such as extortion are punished the same throughout the country, a specialized research agency, and quadrupling the state's investigation. Meanwhile, Margarita Zavala, an independent candidate, indicated that the axis of her government, in case of winning the presidential election, would be to strengthen the police, using technology to increase the analysis, combating feminicides and trafficking in persons, as well as eliminating violence through moral values. López Obrador defended his security plan, saying anemic growth had brought about a breakdown in law and order, and noting that you can't fight fire with fire. He repeated his pledge to sweep corruption out of the government from top to bottom. AMLO showed no great enthusiasm for the debate on Sunday and even began leaving the stage while the camera was still trained on the 5 candidates at the close. Moving on. The European Union and Mexico reached an agreement on Saturday on a new free trade deal, a coup for both parties in the face of increased protectionism from the United States under President Donald Trump. The agreement in principle with Mexico follows a deal struck last year with Japan and comes ahead of talks next week with the Mercosur bloc of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay. The EU and Mexico wanted to update a trade deal agreed 21 years ago that largely covers industrial goods. The new deal now adds farm products, more services, investment and government procurement, and includes provisions on labor and environmental standards and fighting corruption. Under the deal struck on Saturday, practically all trade in goods with Mexico will now be duty-free, including farm products such as Mexican chicken and asparagus and European dairy produce. The deal will, for example, cut Mexican tariffs of up to 20% on cheeses such as Gorgonzola and increase EU pork exports, the European Commission said. It will also allow Mexican companies to bid for government contracts in Europe and EU companies for those in Mexico, including at state level. Mexican Economy Minister Ildefonso Guajardo said the deal would grant his country better access for products including orange juice, tuna, asparagus, honey, egg, white albumin, as well as equitable access for meat products. It also set to recognize geographical indications for certain food and drink, a key EU demand. In other news, France's President Emmanuel Macron is in Washington this week, the first foreign leader to make a state visit under Donald Trump. The two men, both seen as outsiders before their presidential campaigns, have now developed an unlikely personal rapport. But what's behind the connection? Both Mr. Macron and Mr. Trump were seen as shaking up the political systems in their countries. Both are, in their own ways, outspoken, and both like to project an image of strength. It doesn't hurt either, say some on the American side, that Mr. Macron is male and seen as handsome. Mr. Trump's approach to security has sometimes helped President Macron's own agenda in Europe. The American leader has been a robust figure in asking EU states to take a greater role in their own security and raise their defense spending to 2% of GDP. Mr. Macron, who has promised France will meet that target by 2025, is keen for Europe to have more autonomy in security and defense matters and is pushing his proposal of a European intervention initiative with the common resources and strategic goals that would allow it to carry out its own missions, as France does now. But in a country where too close a proximity to the US can be politically dangerous for a president, Mr. Macron will need to have something more to show for it. He recently claimed to have convinced his American counterpart to stay engaged in Syria, but that was quickly denied by the White House. And so far, despite raising expectations, there's little evidence of the French leader's influence over President Trump on key issues like climate change, the Iran nuclear deal, or the status of Jerusalem. The visit will be a chance to discuss those policy differences with the US. President Macron will also talk to Donald Trump about his planned tariffs on EU steel and aluminum, the conflict in Syria, and Washington's controversial decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. In other headlines, Ivana Trump said she thinks a second term for her ex-husband would be unnecessary. President Donald Trump's first wife discussed Trump family life in and out of the White House ahead of the May paperback release for her new book, Raising Trump, with the New York Post's gossip section on Saturday. Ivana said she thinks Trump might miss his freedom and may have underestimated how much is involved in being president. Though he lacks political experience, she said, the Donald can hold his own through brokering friendships with tough leaders like Russian President Vladimir Putin, who she thinks is the toughest guy in the world. Ivana said she sympathizes also with First Lady Melania Trump after lawyer Michael Cohen admitted he paid porn star Stormy Daniels $130,000 to silence her about an alleged 2006 affair with Trump. She also feels bad for Melania because she remembers how badly she felt. The former Mrs. Trump said she hopes her daughter Ivanka Trump gets out of D.C. soon, and she would also prefer if she would move back to New York. Politics is a very dirty business, she said, adding that if her daughter would go back to New York and running her fashion brand, she'd be her own boss. This was all for today. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Elliot Bullman. Remember to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and log on to MexicoNewsNetwork.com for more information on Mexico and the world. Until next time.